Welcome to the UnWokable podcast. I'm here today with a great activist, a great advocate for children and education in the state of Oklahoma, who has a very interesting story to share. Her name is Leah Hull, and she has been working for a very long time. We met last year, working on the rules for 1775. And thank you, Leah, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be here.
No, it's really great. Why don't you just go ahead and give us a little introduction as to what you've been doing and how you've been involved in the past since we met, maybe even before then.
Okay. I'm a former educator. I taught for a couple years at a private school in Sand Springs. And then I also taught a little bit at Jenks Public School as well. Currently, my role is Mama Bear. I've been advocating for my own children. They attend Jenks Public Schools at the West Intermediate campus and also at Northwest Elementary. So I've been doing personal advocation for them. And then also last year, I was asked for multiple times to attend meetings at the State Board of Education and spoke out against Joy Hoffmeister, which garnered a lot of response in just what I had to say to her, and just honestly the failure that our legislators, policymakers, and those in charge of our education system, just their failure in what they're doing, and really how that's trickling down to our children and the curriculum and how they're being taught. And so again, I've just been advocating for my children, and when I get the opportunity to advocate more on a corporate or global scale, I definitely take those opportunities.
Yeah, and you've been very effective. When we met at a meeting to propose the rules, or the temporary rules for House Bill 7075, which I call the Oklahoma Education Civil Rights Act. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. But it's the anti-CRT bill. And Leah, I had fought to try to get into speak at this meeting, and I was kind of disappointed until I heard Leah speak. And she had 5 minutes and just knocked it right out of the park. She hit every point about why we needed to pass the rules, the temporary rules at that point, and why we needed the permanent rules so we could stop this discrimination in our schools. I will say, I just want to go on a little tangent there. At that meeting, there was a Washington Post reporter there, and her name is Karen Attia, and she was tweeting at the same time that Leah was speaking. Yeah. And I'll give my perspective, and Leah can give hers. But what happened was Karen Attia, who is a activist journalist, if you even want to call her a journalist, came out and was tweeting during the meeting that the only people that were against, or that were for the rules for CRT, for the CRT bill, were white women.
Yes.
And this is fortuitous that I wasn't there as a speaker, because as that was going on, I was watching her tweet this stuff on Twitter. And I just started, I got with Leah right afterwards, and I said, this is crazy. She's calling you, as we can see, with our eyes. Leah, you're not a white woman, are you?
No, I like to say I'm racially ambiguous. I can be whatever you want whenever. But yeah, honestly, John, you brought it to my attention. Karen was sitting right there. She was tweeting very fast, saying that there was only white women. And clearly, I'm not just white. I am actually of American Indian descent, African American descent as well. I have slave lineage in my legacy, and then but I'm also American, and I'm a patriot, and I stand on the right side of truth and the right side of history. So, yeah. But it's always interesting to see how our media will curve things to fit their agenda or to fit their narrative, and especially with women, I would say, or women of color, they really want to silence the truth that we will speak out and that we can also see as well.
Yes, well, and my favorite tweet from Karen Atia that day, it was actually the next day that she sent in response to that, was, "What a mess."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you don't lie, and pretend to be a journalist spreading information, and you're actually spreading a incorrect narrative to suit your political ideological needs and those who are paying you to do it, then you won't have a problem. You won't have a mess.
Right.
And I just wanted to highlight that a little bit, because Leah is the prime example of the fact that there are many people of color, many that are against this ideology, this woke ideology, the CRT, which is all lumped into queer theory and some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But there are many, and way more than they want you to know.
Yeah.
And so, all right, well, let's dive into the main issue here, because you have some news for us involving Jenks Public Schools.
Jenks Public Schools.
Yes, and so from my understanding, you have a student. One of your children is a student there, and they were given some assignments that caused you great harm or alarm, excuse me. And so, why don't you just go ahead and tell us what happened?
So I have 3 children, and I have one that's at Jenks West Intermediate. She's a 5th grader. And then I have 2 other ones that are at Jenks Northwest. Today, we're going to focus more on Jenks West Intermediate and my 5th grade daughter. According to her, she came home yesterday, and while we were doing an outdoor activity, she comes up to her and says, "Hey, Mom, this is what we learned about today." And so obviously, when she comes home, I try to prompt them, "Hey, how was your day?" And sometimes they talk to me then, but sometimes they kind of need a debrief, and then they'll come to me, within a couple hours, and they let me know. So yesterday, on this particular occasion, we were actually sitting out at the gathering place, and she just came up to me and she said, "Hey, Mom, we read some articles today from the outgoing 6th graders." So Sophie, my daughter, will be going into 6th grade. And I said, "Okay." And she goes, and before I even really prompted or said, "What were they about?" she immediately started just tumbling out these words that put me on high alert and high alarm. So one of the articles that she read was about the LGBTQ plus community. Another article that she read was about sleep paralysis and the demonic entity that accompanies that. And then this is a word, regardless of the research that I've done, I've been very, very aware of what we allow, or what my husband and I allow our children to hear, see, and then also just read. But she mentioned the term sexualism. And as a 5th grade young girl, that's not a term that's in her vocabulary.
Just interject. So 5th grade is what age?
5th grade, 10. 10, 11, maybe. Where you are, and in a very positive light, where you do hear these terms are in the political realm now. Okay. Dr. James Lindsay, if you can remind me of his book that he wrote, but he has a chapter and discusses in depth about sexualism. So these are not terms that young children are necessarily have access to unless it's being provided to them. And so I honestly prayed about what my response was going to be. I fired off a very quick email, which I think John has it, and you may want to share it.
Yeah, let's just throw that up, and now that you're talking about it, okay? Here we go.
And so this email that I wrote, I went ahead and wrote it to Dr. Stacy Butterfield, which is the Jenks superintendent, and I wrote it to Shan Glandon and Suzanne Lair, which are the admin for the strategy and teaching learning and teaching strategies, the admin for that at Jenks Public School. And then also Michelle Sumner, which is the principal at Jenks West Intermediate, and then also her 2 teachers. They team teach, so Lisa Worth and Paige Hansen. I was very hot when I wrote this. I was upset. I was a little angry. So this is what I wrote. Sophia came home and told me today that the outgoing 6th graders wrote articles for the incoming 6th graders. Some of the articles she read included LGBTQ, sleep paralysis, and the explanation of the demonic entity that accompanies it, and sexualism. I said, I want copies of every article she read. And I went ahead and said, you all are specifically pushing an agenda on my child and multiple other children. I'm also sure that you will report there is a plethora of articles available, and that may be true. And then I called them out what I think that they are. And I believe that the public school in its entirety, because of curriculum and just the pedagogy that is being filtered from the public, I would say public university, this is now the way in which our education system runs. This is what they're teaching, and this is what they're pushing. It's a type of gender fluent literacy. Okay. I'd like to say 2 things. I made the assumption that these articles were more than likely checked off by the 6th grade teachers. Again, an assumption. And then I made an assumption that they were probably worked on at home, and then maybe even in the school library. And so those 2 are an assumption, but it gives me an idea of what is happening and what the children have access to and the type of resources that they have access to. And I'd like to add, a couple of weeks ago, Sophia came, I said her name now, so her name is Sophia, but a couple of weeks ago, my daughter came home with a rendition of Little Women. And so it was a graphic novel. Many kids like reading graphic novels, comic books. So, but it is a retelling of the original Little Women. But nothing about it is a retelling of Little Women. It is cloaked in family issues. It is cloaked in racial issues. And then it's also, the big kicker is at the end, it's all about this girl coming out to her family. So nothing to do with the original purpose or intent of Little Women. I was able to put a code or a stop or an alert on the types of books Sophia could check out at the library. So I have taken action steps to protect my own daughter. And I've also met continuously with Shan Glenn and Suzanne Lear, who assured me multiple times that this kind of stuff could not happen and would not happen when I presented them my research. But here we are, and it came to my doorsteps yesterday.
Wow. Well, okay. Couple of things. So I wanted to get into, you said that you believe, or you're making an assumption that this is coming from the libraries or the 6th grade teachers themselves, and that you mentioned that it might be coming home. Have you seen any of this come home in homework or anything like that?
So in my children's homework, I've not seen things like this. But for instance, when my children attended another site of Jenks Public Schools, they attended Jenks East Elementary. They're very big on using Prodigy. I know that that's kind of been out in the media right now, but the Prodigy is a math game, but many of the way that they're teaching elements of math is through using, again, this gender literacy. So they're using binary and non-binary and these terms that are really just making it so a child, when they hear these things, they know that, oh, I've heard these before in math, so it's not that big of a deal if I hear it outside of that context or outside of that concept. But binary and non-binary culturally is a new term. much like how we've discussed, is that much of the left has taken terms and revitalized them to fit a new narrative. So those are the kind of things that I've seen in the library books. I've seen at East, there are certain authors that are not in the at Northwest, so that's an elementary school, but all in East Elementary, these LGBTQ trans writers, it's all in East Elementary. Fortunately, I was able to do a little bit of research with Northwest and it wasn't there. And at Jenks West Elementary, I was able to talk to the librarian there, the media center, the director of the media center. And she jokingly told me that she did not read all 16,000 books that are in her library, but she could assure me that they are not sexually explicit. One question that I always get, which kind of surprises me, but they always ask me, am I concerned about the content or the topic? And point blank, unless maybe I'm mistaken, isn't it kind of one and the same? So my concern is there are topics that are being relayed to young children and the content is sexually explicit, pornographic in nature, and it is grooming young children.
Yes. Well, and first of all, content and topics are directly related. They're just, and that's where they will come at you, is with these kind of semantic terms that are designed to confuse you. And Leah obviously knows enough to not be fooled by that. And you need to follow that example. Can I ask you this question? Is there a DEI office for Jenks Public Schools?
As far as I know, no, but that's something that I maybe need to look a little bit further. And Jenks has done very good at being very stealth, very kind of closed off. And when I look at it, when I've looked at the programs that they have, I don't believe I see a DEI.
Not an office, but there might be officers.
Now, that was the next thing that I was going to say. That's not to say that there are not people that are trained and prepared in that role, I would say, to accept and then also to really push that, I would say, as a school culture, and
right.
Again, I'm not teaching there, but in professional development and in things of that nature, resources and curriculum.
Right. Well, and that's something I think we should look into, and I'm going to help you with that. But because I would almost guarantee that there is an officer or 10,
yes,
if there's not a DEI office. But we can go into that. So I wanted to also put up next the hold on, let me see, get this.
So before we put up the response, why don't we talk about my response today?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Let's go into your response.
So after I emailed that, again, to be honest, I prayed about what my next thing that I was going to do. And I would say probably about 9 months to a year ago, on another forum, I was reading through what do parents do in this situation when your child comes home with something like this? And some parents are saying you go to the teacher, you deal with the teacher, and then other ones were like, you go to the admin, you deal with the admin. Well, in this case, I've done that. I've gone to the teacher, I've gone to admin multiple times. I will say that I've gone to higher up, teaching and learning strategies, to admin, to Stacy Butterfield. They know who I am. And I don't mean that I mean that in a humble way, as in the sense is, when something happens, I'm emailing them. When I find out research, I'm emailing them. When I find out resources and I'm like, is this happening in Jenks or at my child's school, I'm emailing them. So in that form, it said, stop doing that. Go and create a police report, file a formal police report. So I honestly sat on it for about the last 12 hours, and I decided today that was going to be my course of action. So I drove to Jenks Police Department, filed a formal police report with them. And because Jenks has its own police department in for the school, they now brought in the Jenks Public School Police Department, which is really kind of semantics because they actually serve on Jenks Police Department,
Right.
and then they're basically just resource officers in the
Right.
school.
Right.
And so as I said, I filed a formal police report. Again, gave them my concerns. So the sexualism, the sleep paralysis, and the LGBTQ. And again, that resource officer also asked me if I was concerned with the content or the topic. And within about less than an hour, I received a response, which I sent over to John. I received a response from Suzanne Lair, which is the head of the admin for teaching and learning strategies. And John will be able to show that in just a few seconds.
Hold on. There we go.
So her response to myself and the principal at Jenks Western Media was, we are investigating this matter and have suspended access to these articles until we have more information.
Okay, I just want to stop right there. I just want to stop right there. So what they are telling you, what Jenks is telling you, is that you as a parent do not have access to materials that have been given and used with your child in the classroom.
Yeah.
Why? That is outlandish. It's absolutely illegal according to Oklahoma law.
Mm-hmm.
If they have given it to your child or even plan on giving it to your child, I believe
it's curriculum.
It is curriculum and should be given to you immediately upon your request. So I just want to point out for everyone watching this, Jenks Public Schools, and the Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services for Jenks Public Schools has denied a parent's request to provide her with materials involved in the curriculum of her school at her request. That has been denied. And first and foremost, everyone who watches this and sees this needs to be calling Secretary of Education Ryan Walters, Joy Hoffmeister, about this situation, the governor of Oklahoma, your state, your representative, your senator, because Jenks Public Schools has in this email violated state law.
Yeah.
Okay.
This in our Parental Bill of Rights, it specifically states parents have all access to curriculum. Again, what they'll probably do is make it semantics and say, well, it's not curriculum because it's child produced. But that was correct. My child was a part of an assignment in which the outgoing sixth graders wrote things. That's what my daughter said. And she doesn't, I'm not prompting her. These are things that she's saying. The outgoing sixth graders wrote articles for us to read. And this is what we were presented with.
Right.
It's infuriating.
And here's the thing. They're using, this is what's really disturbing about this. These sixth graders who are writing these articles to the incoming sixth graders, these outgoing sixth graders are writing articles to incoming sixth graders or fifth graders right now.
Yeah.
Did not get these things out of the ether, out of the air. It wasn't something that they just decided that they were going to write about. This is something that's being
and that's why I made
the schools.
And that's why I made the assumption, again, an assumption, but I'm assuming that someone looked over these topics,
right,
and then gave the go ahead. So either these topics were given, hey, you can write about these things, or it was an open forum for the students to choose, and these topics were okay. So either way, it's coming into our classrooms. Either way, your children are being inundated with it. Either way, it's happening, and it's happening now, and it's happening. Like we cannot deny the reality of the situation.
That's right. And well, and it goes to show, I mean, everyone on the left, the woke left, talks about systemic issues.
Yeah.
This is designed to make queer ideology, queer theory, gender ideology, systemic within our schools.
Yes.
The only thing that you can, they want to replace their ideology with all of the content.
Yes.
Norman Public Schools DEI officer says explicitly, you have to embed equity into everything that you do. When you embed equity, or the idea that you can manufacture outcomes on the front end through discrimination, by pejorativizing the normal, which is what queer theory is designed to do, then it will come to a point where you have students passing it on to students.
Yes.
And we've always had a situation, I think, in all of life, where you have kids talking about things that they're not necessarily supposed to be talking about, whether that's on the playground, all of that. But here's the distinction that I want to make sure everybody understands, is that this was a class assignment that was given to these sixth graders by teachers and passed down to incoming sixth graders, are now fifth graders.
Yes.
And so that came from somewhere, and we're going to help get to the bottom of that. But I think what Leah has hit on here is something that we need to really start exploring when it comes to how to fight this in our schools. You can go to your legislators, you can advocate, you can go to school board meetings, all that is great. But there's Supreme Court precedent.
Yeah.
There's Supreme Court precedent that one cannot use the guise of education to transmute and sexual content, especially when that is not approved by the parents and is explicit in the curriculum.
Right.
And so Leah has involved the police, and I think it's interesting that they asked about the distinction between topic and content, right?
Yes. The same question that the school librarian taught me. So, that may give credence that there is a DEI officer there, because immediately, are you concerned with the topic or the content? Well, sir, ma'am, I'm concerned with what is being trickled down to my child, content and topic.
Right. And when that's handed down from a teacher to a student, which is what happened. And I want to make sure this is very clear, that, the argument is going to be made. I try to steel man the other side's argument, right? They're going to come out and they're going to say, well, this is from a student to a student.
Yeah.
No. There was an intermediary, faculty of the school, that took that and gave it to the younger students.
Yeah.
They will use children as shields for themselves so they can translate ideology that they want to go down. And that is an extremely evil action in my estimation. It's like holding up a bank, and when the police come after you, you grab a child and you hold them up in front of you so they can't shoot you.
Go ahead.
Yes. And so that's where we're at here, is that there's no moral standing in terms of what they're willing to use children for when it comes to spreading this kind of stuff in our schools.
Right. And with my daughter, one of the things that it didn't break my heart, but again, it put a red flag in the depths of my soul. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but one thing that she said was, she knows I'm going to advocate. And I think sometimes my children, and I'm not loud, I'm not banging on doors and things of that nature. A lot of this stuff is through an email, or I have sit down conversations. Things have been very, it's been good, the conversations. They've listened to me. I don't know how far they've taken that. But one of the things that really concerns me is her response to me last night was, just please don't email or tell anyone, because I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. My teachers aren't going to like me. And that is very concerning to me. If my daughter is walking into daily situations with the concern of, my teachers might not like me because my mom is advocating for me. My teachers might not like me because our value system might be, and value and belief system might be a little different. My teachers might not like me, might not pick me because they don't like that my mom is holding them to a standard. And that to me is very concerning because point blank, I don't have another option for my children right now. And I know that homeschool is an option, but there's not a, there's not another viable option for my kids right now.
Yeah. Well, and that gets into the issue of school choice that I think has been going around Oklahoma. And I profess some worry about school choice that I believe is directly related to the woke issues we're seeing, primarily because you see private schools right now being taken over by this, and there's no recourse for the parent.
Right.
They can't go to the school board meeting. They can't vote the school board out because the board is hired or chosen by a private entity. And I'm hesitant to give that up because at this point, you have enough parents and enough people get upset about this. They're going to go in and they're going to vote out the Jenks school board, that may be doing part of this, and the superintendent that's supporting it, and vote in people who are going to help make change. But there is also a case for school choice in that, is that, if you find that your student is being inundated with this stuff, you should be able to take and pull them out and put them in a different school, at least in the elementary school that's not doing this,
right.
And so on and so forth. But did you, I wanted to ask you, did you get any other type of direction from the police about how they would be moving forward, or what you needed to get in order to keep this moving forward?
So the resource officer that I spoke to today, who also doubles as Jenks PD, told me that number one, the email systems have been kind of lagging. So the reason why I didn't have an immediate response was because of that. But you can see probably because after I contacted the police, I got a response, an email response within about 30 minutes this morning. He said that I should, if I don't have a response by Monday, then I can follow up with him, and he gave me his card. And so I'll go ahead and follow up with him. But at this point, I mean, maybe because I was just sitting in there and it was time to kind of get me out of there, but he was like, we will be looking into this. We're going to discuss with admin and see what actually happened. And that's great. That's fine. But more importantly, I think it's really important that honestly, that a first formal police report has been written. I think that honestly, this should become precedent. I think that we should begin inundating when our children are coming home, because the teachers and the admin are not listening to us anymore. Okay. Right. And for lack of better words, they've been bought, paid, and they have a purpose and they have an agenda. Regardless if they say they do or do not, that is what our education system is moving into. It is, again, this gender literacy, inundating our students with, to be point blank again, just some sexual perversion that for young children is just not in their preview mentally, intellectually. And then really the biggest response to this has been, these are conversations for the guardian and the parent at large. These are not conversations that should be housed within a public classroom, because what's more than likely going to happen is, as you mentioned, yes, we know in the background it's teacher to student, but what's happening is, even my daughter, they're discussing it amongst themselves. So then you have young minds trying to make sense of what they've just read, relaying and responding to other children what they just read, and then having conversations right there. That is damning.
Right.
Okay?
Well, and all of us who went through school know that kids in younger grades look up to other kids in older grades. So it's a weaponization of the culture America has built in our schools of seniority, of oh, I want to be a sixth grader. It's always I want to be a sixth, I want to be a ninth grader, I
Yes.
want to be a senior. That's very heavy in schools, and people who've taught and see that and are more acquainted with that than maybe people who've been out of high school for 20 years and haven't been in there. But
Right.
we all remember that
Yes.
seniority is an issue, and so they're weaponizing the culture of the good parts of the culture, because you can use that. I had a teacher that always used to say, the strongest force on the planet is peer pressure.
Mm.
And that's the truth. And that's what they're
Yes.
weaponizing now, is that they're using kids as a shield. Say,
Mhm.
oh, well, we have a sixth grader giving it to fifth grader, nothing, not a big deal. Da, 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 da. Somebody facilitated that.
Yes.
Somebody facilitated that. All of this underscores the need for parents to understand that this is what they call the long march through the institutions. And critical race theory, queer theory, post-colonial theory, all the critical theories are designed specifically to be implanted into education and to weaponize your kids as activists in their spheres of influence. So when we talk about um, peer pressure, they are weaponizing that relationship, their spheres of influence. And Leah, I just want you to just kind of give us a kind of a button up, of what you are going to do, what you think parents need to understand from your perspective, and how they can maybe follow in your footsteps in terms of this realm of getting police involved and forcing them to see what's happening in the schools.
Yeah. My number one is, and I know we've kind of all taken that. We're like, we're involved in our kids. We're asking them questions. We're trying to go to the board meetings. And I would say all those things are the board meetings and making sure that your school knows who you are. Those things are all are very important. But what's more important is that you need to be read up, or have an understanding of these terms, of these ideologies, and what's happening. Because what you're seeing is, as soon as you go and present something, they're going to ask you a semantic question. Is it content or topic? We're not concerned about that. There is specific curriculum or specific ideologies that is being trickled down to our students. So it's more than just showing up at a board meeting. I mean, to be honest, you get maybe 5 minutes in a board meeting. Oftentimes you are directing a question, but then as you hear other people talking, or maybe hear other things that a board is saying, all of a sudden other things start coming. So that's good. Those are great ways to advocate, but more importantly, be aware of what these terms. Sexualism is not a term that a child should have access to, know, or be understanding or talking with other 5th grade, 10 or 11-year-olds. Quite frankly, and I'm just going to put this out here, I don't care what your sexual orientation is or your preferences is 18 plus, but anything younger than that, we are literally dealing with children molding their identities and how they see the world, how they see themselves. Do not be the one that breeds that confusion. Do not just sit back and say, you know what, I trust these teachers, they could never do this. The issue is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the way that teachers are being trained now. There is no subtracting or trying to get away from that. This is how our public universities are instructing our generation of teachers. And so you need to be very aware of what that curriculum looks like, what that pedagogy looks like, and what teachers are teaching, because it's inundated in everything. And then unfortunately, look in your media centers and look what your children are reading. And I don't mean that as a scare tactic, but really look at what the media center is purposing, what type of resources there. And don't ever let a librarian tell you, well, I haven't read through all 16,000 books, but I can assure you it's not happening, because
Mhm.
I can assure you that it is happening.
Yes, and this underscores the point that you can have all the school choice programs you want. You can go after every teacher and every individual instance. But there is DEI in Jenks, even if there's not a DEI office in Jenks. Why? Because every teacher is being trained by a DEI influenced college of education.
Yes.
And they are taking tests for accreditation and or for certification that push this ideology. And these are the structures that, you know, we can't expect to solve this problem by only dealing with the symptoms. We have to deal with the root of the problem, and as far upstream as possible. And that is going to begin with your universities, DEI offices, your colleges of education. OU has a DEI dean that's designed to make sure that all of this is in the pedagogy classes, how you teach a teacher to be a teacher.
Yes.
So
And one
ahead.
thing, this can be, you know, we can dive into this at another time, but, you know, late last year, I uncovered a program that Jenks is using, and it's called the AVID program. And when you go back, it's linked directly to Kate Castle and linked directly to SEL. One of their biggest quotes on there is from Gloria Ladson-Billings, and we all know of her. So they say it's not there, but if you just do your simple research, it's there.
Since you brought it up, let's go ahead, and I just want to say this. Who is Gloria Ladson-Billings? Give us the 10-cent version here of what exactly you're talking about, and we'll follow up on another show very soon.
So you're gonna have to help me too. But Gloria,
okay.
She a professor, correct? In Wisconsin.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Okay.
believe so. I believe so.
Yes, and sorry, I've got a fly. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I see it. It's okay.
But she is a proponent of critical race theory. Okay, and her main agenda is making sure that critical race theory is. I think I just lost you, unless you can still see me.
I can see you. I can see
okay,
you.
Excellent. So. Her main theory, and let me just get it real quick. Okay. Just give me just a few minutes.
You're good. The point of this is that SEL is a delivery mechanism for critical theory ideology, and Gloria Ladson-Billings and Castle and all of this, they have transformed what SEL was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, into making teachers practice psychology without a license to implant an ideology in children. Yes. And we're going to get into this. Leah has done so much research on SEL in Oklahoma schools, and how it's being weaponized against your kids. And that's an attack on the family too. We've got to understand that a lot of this is designed to separate children from their parents and from the influence of their parents. As teachers, I think all of us have said, well, these are my kids, they're my kids, in a kind of a form of saying, hey, I care about these kids. But guess what? Teachers, they aren't your kids, they are their parents' kids. And a lot of this rolls into SEL as a delivery mechanism designed to manipulate the minds of children and implant now an ideology that has taken over that system.
So Gloria Ladson-Billings, back in September of 1995, with the help of William F. Tate, who is out of Louisiana State University, drafted or published a scholarly article, and that was toward a critical race theory of education. That's the name of it. And the abstract is, this article asserts that despite the salience of race in U.S. society as a topic of scholarly inquiry, it remains untheorized. So the article argues for a critical race theoretical perspective in education that is foundational of critical race theory of legal scholarship. And so if you go back to Dr. James Lindsay, just kind of parenting him among other proponents as well, they consistently are stating that we are not we're not talking about these things, that critical race theory is not in education, and that critical legal studies is not being funneled through critical race theory now into our public education. But the truth of the matter is that this has been a long haul. It started over 25 to 30 years ago, and it's not something new. It's been there. It's just been bubbling underneath the surface. But increasingly, as I know we kind of keep hitting this, but our universities began to be inundated in this theory, whether legal or education theory. And so now this is the leading pedagogy for teachers. This is how they're instructing.
And it's mandated. It's mandated. And here's the thing. If you want to flip it back on them, is it topic or is it content?
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's because critical legal studies or critical race theory is a topic, is not being taught as a class, right? But it is content in all education, because anytime when you see the DEI officer at Norman Public Schools say that you have to embed equity and the commitment to equity in everything that you do, that means they are embedding the content and the praxis in every subject and every wall hanging in every book that they can possibly do it. And so that's why when they are saying to you things like topic and content, it's a semantic sleight of hand. When you have the topic, it's going to instruct the content. It's going to influence the content. And the topic can be at a very high level. You know, your elementary school kids are not in your teacher's pedagogy classes in college, but everything that are in your teacher's pedagogy classes will influence what your students see in the classroom through the teacher. And so I think that's the base point that we're coming to here, is that there's a pipeline, and that pipeline has weaponized teachers to the point that you may have a case to call the police on the teachers for what is being allowed to be spread to your students, whether it's directly or they hand it to a student and the other student hands it to the other one, you know. And that's what, again, I want to bring us back to that point before we end here.
And this is not an attack on teachers. I want that to be made. This is not an attack. This is an attack on the ideology system that is housing our children. And I think it's very, you know, sometimes it's easier for, you know, take away the boundaries of a public school and a building, and you would never allow your child to go to the neighbor's house and hear these things. You would automatically have a response. You would automatically do things. So don't hide behind the fact of, oh, well, it's a teacher in a public school system, they're doing the best for my child. Because outside of that wall, they're just an individual pushing an agenda.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, they're being incentivized to do that
as well.
And that's what I've heard many things, including Ryan Walters, say, you know, well, teachers stop going woke. Okay, I think that we do need teachers to stop going woke, especially those who vehemently disagree and know what it is. But most teachers just want to teach.
Yes.
And if they're told in college that this is what they should teach, they're going to follow that line. They have been largely, they call it the work. The work is a systemic manipulation. And they do it through trainings, they do it through, you know, incentives, they do it through, if that doesn't work, they do it through discrimination. They do it, they have all manners of doing this. And the teacher will teach what they believe and have been told is the right thing to do. And so nothing, it just goes back to the original point. Nothing here is going to change unless we deal with the university system and the colleges of education that are pushing this through. So, and I really hope that maybe we've opened up a new line here of not attack, but dealing with the problem of disincentivizing the structures that are making this so prevalent in our schools. So Leah, thank you so much for talking to me. And we're going to continue this conversation in the future. We are going to keep up to date on what's happening in this situation and other situations across the state. I have to say this, and if you like our content here, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and to support what we're doing. You can also view me at unwokable.substack.com. Leah, do you have any places where people can reach out to you, or that you're putting out at the moment? You may not. That's okay.
I mean, I have my website that has information on there if you guys would like to reach me there, but really,
what is the website?
The revivetherepublic.org.
Okay. Well, and she has she's been busy being a mom and a mama bear and focusing on her family, and has poked her head out again because this is so important. So revivetherepublic.org, she has a bunch of great information about SEL and how that's all related to the critical theory situation. So please visit her there, and she'll be back on here shortly. But thank you all, and thank you, Leah, for being here.
Thank you for having me, John. Bye.